Hi, everyone. Morgan Tarpley Smith here. I'm so excited today to have a live author chat with Ashley Clark. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope that you'll just chat along with us. We have questions already that we've been collecting over the last 2 weeks. So if you didn't get your question in, though, please feel free to ask during our chat. And if we have a little time at the end, we'll be glad to ask your questions. So, first of all, who is Ashley? Well, she is a debut novelist as of last year with her book, The Dress Shop on King Street. And it's part of the Heirloom Secret series. Um, Ashley lives in Florida. Her books are definitely set on the Gulf Coast. Between her love of Florida, we go to Alabama. We're going to be in New Orleans, which is my part of the world. We also dip into Savannah. So her book that released this year, though, is Paint and Nectar. So we'll kind of be leaning more toward talking about that book, but we can't not talk about the others as well because they're all a little interconnected, which we'll talk more about later. But I wanted to read you the back of Paint and Nectar so you kind of get a taste of what the novel is about if you don't know already. In 1929, a spark forms between Eliza, a talented watercolorist, and William, a charming young man with a secret that could ruin her career. Their families forbid their romance because of a long-standing feud over missing heirloom silver. Still, Eliza and William's passion grows despite the barriers, causing William to deeply regret the secret he's keeping. But setting things right will come at a cost. In present-day Charleston, a mysterious benefactor gives Lucy an old house, along with all the secrets it holds, including enigmatic letters about an antique silver heirloom. Declan Pinkney, whom Lucy's been avoided since their disastrous first date, is set on buying her house for his family's development company. As Lucy uncovers secrets about the house, its garden, and the silver, she becomes more determined than ever to preserve the historic Charleston property, not only for history's sake, but also for her own. All right. So I think without further ado, we're going to get Ashley on here.
Thank you, Morgan.
And
Hey guys! Do you see me? I'm so happy to be here. I
here's
want to thank you,
Ashley.
Morgan, for having me, and thank all of you for your questions and for watching along. It makes it so much more fun to hear from all of you. So thanks for your participation today.
Yay, we're excited. We're glad to have you, Ashley. And you live in Florida, right? I got that right?
Yes, you did. Yep, I live in Pensacola, which is like barely Florida, more like
Yeah,
right on the cusp with Alabama, but we
yeah.
still are technically Florida.
It's very close because yeah, because I was thinking for a while, I was like, I think she's in Alabama, but then I was like, no, she's right on the line because I know my cousins
People
live
think
in.
that a lot because I write, like, Dress Shop, for example, is set half in Fairhope, Alabama. I write a lot of stories that kind of cross over the border a little bit, and so it's not uncommon for people to think that I'm from Alabama, but I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
technically from Florida.
and I'll correct myself. I said Savannah. It's Charleston, actually. So
But you're close because there are some scenes from Savannah in
that's probably what
Dress
I was
Shop.
thinking about, because
Mm-hmm.
you kind of go all around the Gulf Coast with the heirloom secrets. It's a trilogy, right? Because this is a
It
third book
is.
coming
Yep.
out next year.
Yep. February. Sounds good. That's a great question. I get that a lot. Sometimes people will discover my books. Well, there are only two of them right now, but sometimes people will discover them out of order and want to know if they have to read them. So that's true. Technically, there are three. Only I'm the only one who knows about the third, but it still counts. And so people will wonder, do I have to do them in order or whatever? So the short answer is no. You don't have to read them in order. They stand alone completely fine. But the way that they're written is I try to write them essentially with multiple layers so that you can just pick up the story And if you want just a quick read, you can just breeze through it, and hopefully you'll find it to be very entertaining and interesting. I try to make sure that they're very rich with settings. So especially if you're interested in Charleston, it's going to give you a strong Charleston feeling, that kind of thing. Thanks. Thank you so much. Yeah, I try to pick settings that are evocative for me so that I can convey that to the reader. So if you're wanting something along those lines, completely fine to read them out of order. You'll be able to follow the story with no problem and hopefully really enjoy it. However, there's also a deeper level thread that's much more complex with an interconnectivity between the different characters. And if you want to follow, like if you're a super fan and you want to follow everything, you don't want to miss any of the Easter eggs, that's when you're going to want to read them in order, because it makes it a little bit easier to follow along with like this person's aunt or uncle or whatnot. So it's really up to the reader. I feel like there's a little bit of a benefit to reading them in order, but it's slight enough that I would certainly not say that you have to, especially if you think one of them is more interesting than the other. Like I've had some people feel like they're more drawn to Paint and Nectar because it's set in the 20s. Or conversely, they're more drawn to Dress Shop because it's set in the 40s and they want to pick according to time period, which is totally fine to do. And it will also be fine to do when the third one releases in February, but we've got a couple more months before that's on the table. So you're cutting out, Morgan. I'm not hearing you well. I was hearing you great, and then you just disappeared. Mm-mm. That's so strange. Yeah, you're back. Yeah, I can hear you now. There you go. Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, yeah. That's so weird. It was perfect before, and then it just totally cut out. Yeah, I can hear you great. No, you're fine, Morgan. No problem. These things always happen when you're live during the tech checks is always fine, and then it happens when you're live. Mhm. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, I have my computer behind me. I can pull them up. While we're waiting, I can go ahead and add something on that I wanted to say about the trilogy question too. Yeah, one other thing that I was going to say about it is, interestingly enough, I actually wrote these books out of the order that they were published. And so Dress Shop was the last one to be written. And they also are out of order in terms of the chronology of like actual history. So it goes 1940s, 1920s, and then back to the Civil War. And I wanted to publish them in that way because I felt like it was the best way to tell the overarching story. However, it's completely fine to read them jumpy because I wrote them jumpy. So that's kind of a little fun fact as well. Did you hear anything, or you want me to keep forging ahead? I can pull up the questions on my computer if you want me to. Yeah, that's no problem. This is where being a teacher is helpful because I can just, I don't mind a bit, put my teaching hat on. Oh, really? I can do that if that's better. They're going. Just taking 1 minute. Let's see.
Okay, I'm going to test again to see if y'all can hear me. Anything? Ashley, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca and Ellen, for hanging with us. We're working on it. Can you hear me at all, Rebecca or Ellen? Oh, I see hearts. Is that a good thing? Can you hear me, Rebecca? Let's see. Yeah, it's so fun doing live things, but then there's always the risk of this kind of thing. But thanks for hanging with us. And this is why I also, oh, yay, working now. Rebecca, okay, yay, I fixed it. Thanks, Ellen.
Yay!
Woohoo! Thank
That's
y'all
good
for
too
being
because this
understanding. Okay, great.
perfect.
Thank you for telling us. I usually ask, but I forgot to ask at the beginning if you could hear me. So, could y'all hear my intro at all for Ashley, by the way, Rebecca and Ellen? Did it go out after I gave the intro? Do y'all know?
It went out for me after the intro. I know that
Okay.
much.
Okay. Well,
For
maybe,
me, it was
maybe.
after I answered that first question. Then when you
Okay.
came back, I couldn't hear your second question. But I have them here in case it happens again. I'm ready.
Well, good. Okay, great. Well, you answered the first question beautifully. I'm sorry I was
You're
a little
welcome.
distracted.
No
We're
problem.
going to move forward. So, yes, I'm so excited. Okay, good. Ellen said after the intro. Okay, great. Okay.
That's at my
So,
computer.
we are back on track, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us. Okay. So, we just heard about all three amazing books. I actually want to bring them all on the screen real quick while we got a second because I have all the covers. So, let's see. I'm going to get them in order.
Yay!
Let's see if we can squeeze them all. Let's see what happens if we can squeeze them all. So that's the dress shop on King Street. You said that's 1940, so that's the first one in the trilogy, but she wrote it last, which she just
Mm-hmm.
explained. And then we have Paint Nectar, which is 1920s, and then another gorgeous cover for the third one. Oh, it won't let me get the third one on there, so hold on. I'm gonna hide dress shop and then pop up When the Last Rose Blooms. So yeah, so that's her next one. What's the published date on that next year, Ashley?
It's February 1st. So I'm telling
Ooh,
people there's no guarantees,
Valentine's.
but I know, isn't that fun? There's no guarantees, obviously, but typically if you pre order from Baker Bookhouse, they do tend to ship them out as quickly as they can. So with my other two books, the Baker orders went out about 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. So
Ooh,
you
I'm
might be able to
thinking,
get it like January.
yeah, and I'm thinking this could be a good Valentine's Day gift, like with roses. So like roses in this book to match the cover.
I
Tell
like it.
tell the sweethearts. Tell your
I
loved
like
ones.
where you're going with that.
It's just my marketing mind's going off. But anyway, all right, I just had to show you the beautiful book covers. And now the next question, what inspired you to write? We're going to say this trilogy because they're all, connected.
Yeah, and that's a good question because there are so many answers to
And
it.
that
So
and that question's from Taylor Carlisle, by the way. So Taylor Carlisle
hi
asked that.
Taylor, thank you for asking. So I would say At heart, what inspired it was my first trip to Charleston. I fell absolutely head over heels in love with Charleston, and we had taken a walking tour. And I was just fascinated by the stories that the city had to tell, as well as some of these secrets that were never solved. Like one of which you'll see in the third book. I don't want to give too much away, but
Ah.
um, there were these really interesting secrets historically that I was able to fictionalize, and the characters just sort of came alive to me. So that's like the broad sweeping answer. But each book also follows a season that I was in. So like with Dress Shop, with the whole dream of the owning the dress store that Millie and Harper share, that was when I was in this season where I had been pursuing publication for about a decade. And it just was, I hit this point where I was like, okay, if it hasn't happened now, is it going to happen? You know, like this
Oh
is
yeah.
not like a 1 or 2 year kind of thing. This is a long haul patience that's been required. And so
And every
out of
author's
that,
story is different. Every author's story
right,
is different.
right. And so out of that, the whole theme for Dress Shop was born. And it's a similar thing with Paint and Nectar. Paint and Nectar started off just about the secrets with the silver and whatnot, like you read from the blurb.
Hmm.
And then only later, as I edited that through the pandemic, did it really become this deeper question about beauty and the nature of beauty and the power that that has, the role that it plays, particularly through different seasons, through the spring as well as through the winter, and how all of that operates. And the same is going to be true for Where the Last Rose Blooms as well. So it's kind of a marriage between inspiration from seeing some of these places in real life, and then also pairing that with things that are either my own struggles or cultural struggles that I just sort of feel around me, blending all of those together.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like I said before, I hope if no one didn't hear me, I was talking about how I've read Ashley's first two novels, and the setting is just so evocative. And I can tell that she really, not only went to the places she's writing about, but just really captures them on the paper. I haven't been to Charleston myself, but I have been to some of the other places. And yeah, it definitely, like I said, I can't wait to read about New Orleans. My husband's actually
Thank
from New
you.
Orleans, and
Oh, really?
yeah, so how far is Charleston from you, roughly?
It's far. It's like 11 or so hours if you drive.
Oh,
It takes a
wow.
little while. Yeah, we I don't get to go there as people. A lot of people think I live in Charleston because I talk about it so much, but I don't actually. I've only ever been like four times, 5 times. I mean, a good
It's your
amount, but
it's your
not
heart
like
place, one of your heart places.
it is. I love it there. I love the people there. I love the architecture. I love the desserts, the
Oh, yeah,
biscuits.
the food definitely. Well, and that's one of the things that plays into Paint and Nectar is part of Rainbow Row, the iconic street. And we won't say anything else beyond that, but I do like how visual your stories are, and I think your covers really show that too, because you have, a designer, and you have a watercolorist, and so I think it's so cool that all your characters create and they're very artistic, and I think that lends another color to the story because you can just see, like when I was reading Paint and Nectar, I could just see Eliza painting these amazing watercolors, and I was like, I want to see these colors and these watercolors in real life, and I was imagining them. So you did a
That is
great
so
job with
sweet of
that.
you. You know, I feel like that's something that I didn't develop until, a good 5 or 6 years into writing. I just kind of missed the importance of that. And then one day it clicked where I realized that setting has to be really a character. Like, we shouldn't
Hmm.
just say, oh, I think this would be cute to put this story in a city or in the
Yeah.
country or whatever. Like, there should be a reason why your story is set where it is. And so for me, a lot of that pulls into the historical aspects because the story can't be told anywhere else but
Hmm.
these particular settings. And that's definitely true, like you mentioned with Eliza. And actually, Eliza's character, just as a little side note is loosely based off of some of the real life preservationists in
Okay.
Charleston. So if you really want to see her paintings, you should look up like Alice Ravenel Huger Smith in particular. But there are a whole bunch of watercolorists and artists in the 1920s in Charleston doing what Eliza does in the book.
That's so cool. And I do feel like I learned a lot of the history in the two books because like in the first one you have the Gullah culture and stuff and I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
about that. I'd loosely heard about it in the basket weaving and stuff and I thought that was really neat to be able to learn about that culture and that heritage. And then in this one with the preservationists and the women in the 20s really standing up and saying, you know, our city's already taken a lot in history and we're going to claim this. And so thought that
Yeah.
was so cool and it does make you want to learn more about that. So yeah, I can't wait to see what you reveal and come up in with the last rose blooms. But yay! Okay, we're gonna
Thank
move on to the
you.
next. Okay, this is from Kathy Daniel. How do you come up with the characters' names?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's kind of like naming a child. So sometimes it just happens. Like with Millie, I just knew her name was Millie. And Millie's whole character was a very strange experience because all along, I felt like she was a real person. And the more that I wrote her, it was like getting to know her. It wasn't like coming up with
I
her.
feel like she's a real person too. Like I could go to her dress shop and see them. Like I want to go to
Isn't
this
that
dress shop.
cool? I feel like that was just a God gift, to be honest with you. I feel like God was just kind of like, here you go, because they don't always come that easily. And I really do feel like that was just a blessing from the Lord. So I just always knew Millie's name. She just was a Millie, and that was that. Some of their names, though, don't come that easily. And so I get them from a variety of sources, but a lot of the time, what I'll do is I will just Google like baby names, or if they're older, I'll look for baby names from like the 70s or the 50s or whenever it might have been. Because if you just search baby names, you're going to get the baby names from the past like 20 years, And if you need them to be
Mhm.
a little older, you don't want them to have this like super trendy sounding name. But
Yeah.
that actually is a really helpful source. And I will sometimes look at listings, particularly for last names that are like surnames popular in Alabama or South Carolina or
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
That's particularly important for the Charleston stories, like with Declan, because there are so many Charlestonian families who have been in Charleston since the beginning and even before the beginning of America.
Wow.
And so you don't want to
Yeah,
affect credibility.
and accidentally have a family name that's really prominent, right? You got to be
Right.
careful.
Or vice versa, you don't want to have something that seems totally left field and doesn't really sound like a true Charleston name. So balancing all that out in particular, I've had to do some
That's
research. But a lot of
tough.
times I just think you have a J name. I don't know what it is. I'm going to go search for these listings and find one.
So you got to be a little bit of a name detective. You got to kind of,
You
with the
do.
historical ones, you got to make sure, like I said, they fit the time period, they fit the history of the city, the very specific city, and then I know sometimes like there's certain names you might lean toward, but they all like end in A or end in Y, and you're like, I
Yeah.
better rethink this one. Did you
I
have any
do that a
problems like
lot.
that?
In fact, one my line editor after Paint and Nectar, we had gone through a couple of edits already on Paint and Nectar, and she was like, "Just so you know," and I forget who it was. I'm trying to. Oh, I think it was Robert. She said, "Just so you know, I noticed that there are like 4 people named Robert." I had to go out and change some of them because I was naming everybody Robert. I definitely do that. I'm prone to that for sure. Or they'll have rhyming names and things. I don't realize it. Yeah, it's very
Well,
funny.
I think especially with minor characters, it can be hard too because you're like, let me just throw this in there, or it might be one you
Yeah,
throw in and you expect to change it later, and you might forget, and like, oh yeah, I probably need to go back and change that one.
that's exactly what happened to me with all of the various Roberts that I had to then rename.
That's really funny. Okay, so let's see. Kathy Daniel said, "What is your next book about?" Well, this would be when the last rose blooms. So you tell us a little bit about the final book in the trilogy.
I would love to. I'll try to do this succinctly
It's
because
okay. Take your time. We're good.
it'd be a while. So, Where the Last Rose Blooms takes up the story of the people in the prologue of Dress Shop on King Street. So the little
Ooh.
girl and her mother who start the story, Millie's grandma is who it is. And if you have read the Dress Shop on King Street, and they are also connected to Eliza and her family history in Paint and Nectar. So that's where having read the other two books is helpful because it gives you some context, but you don't have to read them ahead of time. But if you have, that's who they are. You might already be familiar with that. And this was by far the hardest book for me to write for multiple reasons. But essentially, in the contemporary, my heroine's name is Alice, and she first shows up in Paint and Nectar at the wedding. If you remember that,
Mhm.
there's like a brief
Uh-huh.
moment where you meet Alice. So that's who she is, and she runs a flower shop on Magazine Street with her aunt, alongside her aunt. And then the hero in this one is Sullivan. He makes appearances in both Dress Shop as well as Paint and Nectar. And the first time he shows up is when Peter is at that consignment sale at the beginning of the book where he first finds the buttons.
Oh,
He's
okay.
Peter's
Mhm.
friend in that. So we
Okay.
don't know him well, but he has a little trail throughout the other books that
I
you might
love that.
recognize
I
with
love
him.
like little Easter eggs. I'll have to go back now when I read the third book and go back to the first one and be like, yeah, him. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and that was what was fun about having written drafts of all of these before they sold. I had the familiarity with both the characters and the stories, so I was able to do a lot of kind of more complex work on interweaving them together that you might not otherwise be able to do if you haven't been working with these characters for like, what, 5 years, six
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
which is fun. So basically, what happens is, um, I'll just say, so people are getting married, wink, wink. And Alice and Sullivan are part of the ceremonies. And Alice's backstory is that her mother went missing during Hurricane Katrina and was never found.
Oh, well.
And so that's an undercurrent throughout her whole story. And Sullivan, he's supposedly only going to be in town for a little while, but then he has kind of some hiccups. So he's there for the wedding, but along the way, he offers to help Alice with the flower shop, like with some rebranding type of stuff, like as a business consultant, essentially. So they get to know each other through the course of that. Well, it turns out that if you've read Dress Shop in King Street, you probably remember Juliet, Millie's
Mhm.
daughter. So she's in this book. And we'll just say that Juliet and Alice have a vested interest in some of the same heirlooms for different
Ooh.
reasons. So they agree to help one another in uncovering what turns out to be family secrets that affect all of them, and it trails back to the Civil War. So the Civil War thread is essentially what connects all of the stories. And that's why I say it's valuable to have read the other two books, but not necessary. However, you will see the interconnectivity of everything coming together in this third one. So if you haven't read the other two, catch up if you can, because it adds a lot, I think,
And I would
if you
recommend
know who
it.
the
It
people are.
is good to read them through in the order because then you'll be able to pick up on those little, especially if you
Right.
read them. Like if you start reading the first two now and the other one's coming out in February, it won't be like
Right.
long to wait. So,
Yeah, it'd still be fresh in your mind. So essentially, what happens is the heroine, her name is Clara, in the historical, um, comes across. I'll say I'm trying not to give
they're
anything
not
away while also telling
spoilers.
you about
Yeah.
um, Millie's ancestors. And the heroine is in this complicated situation because she's an abolitionist, but her father is very prominent in the Confederacy. And so she knows that she wants to start becoming more active against the Confederacy, but she's trying to figure out how to do that. And she falls in love with a Union soldier in the process of that.
Ah.
And there's some secrets, there's espionage, there's
Ooh.
some very important heirlooms that come into play, and all of this has been hidden for a really long time until it comes to light through Alice's story all these years later. And it will also loop back to the answers that she's looking for about her mother. So
Ooh, awesome. And that was very good. No spoilers. You did great.
I know I kept having to stop
It's like,
myself. I'm like, oh, that's gonna give
yeah.
something away. Let me
Yeah, okay,
dodge that.
so is the whole book set in Louisiana or is it go across the state lines a little bit?
No, so Alice's whole story is set in New Orleans, but the historical is still set in Charleston. So
Okay,
it's like
awesome.
half and half, kind of like in Dress Shop.
Okay, cool. Yay! Yeah, I can't wait to read it. I'm really excited. Okay,
Thanks.
great answers. Oh, I want to say this real quick. I forgot to mention the intro. If you comment at least once, you'll be entered into a giveaway to win a copy of your choice of Dress Shop on King Street or Paint Nectar. So if you have the first book and you'd like the second book, Ashley would be glad to send a copy to you. So just comment one time and it'll be entered. You'll enter into the giveaway. All right, next question. We're on to the writing section. What is your favorite thing about writing a split time novel? This is from Renee Pelfrey.
So I love reading split time novels too, and I think that the answer for me is the same. It's the suspense element. So I never really thought I would write suspense. I don't read suspense, and so this is kind of an unlikely answer, but I realized one of the reasons why I as a reader enjoy these types of stories so much is that building of secrecy from one chapter to the next, and like how are they going to connect, and how is this gonna work out or that gonna work out. And I feel
Yeah.
like in telling, yeah, there's telling those stories at the same time, there's something really lovely that can unfold that adds sort of a whole nother, it's not just like, oh, we get a 2 for 1 here. It's like we have this whole other third and fourth layer to the book that comes out through the complexity and through the interconnectivity. And so I think that as a writer, it's the same thing for me. I will often be surprised as well by how the plot unfolds as I'm writing, because it's kind of cool to see how the character. Sometimes it's like the characters sort of tell you what comes next when you're not planning it, and so it's kind of cool to see that process really start to unfold. So yeah, I would say probably the same things that you guys like as readers of dual time fiction are the reasons why I think it's so fun to write.
Yeah, I think so. And I think something you said when you were talking about the third book in trilogy, how it all comes together at the end. I think that is
Right,
the cool thing, the best thing about split time fiction is you're getting two stories in one, but they connect in a way that's profound. And that
right.
connectivity, even if it's sometimes it's a little bit along and then just bam at the end, or sometimes it's a little bit and then at the very end everything comes out. Every writer does it a little bit differently, but it's just that unique, it's coming, that connection. And you're just like guessing about stuff. And yeah, the suspense of how it's going to connect to is just
Right.
I think the magic of split time fiction. So
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there is a genuine sense of question, whereas sometimes with stories, even stories that we love, they sort of are on a slope where it's like the conflict peaks and then it starts to fall as it eases us out of the story. Whereas a lot of times with dual time fiction, we truly have no idea how it's going to end
mhm.
as writers or as readers
Yeah.
until we get to the ending and then it all comes together. I can remember, I was with Paint and Nectar with one of my books. I remember a few years ago of being like, I am like 20% away from being done and I still have no idea how this is going to end. We'll find out.
Well, that kind of question's coming up too in a minute with the writing. I know that everybody likes to ask about things like that. Okay, I was going to read some comments. So Rebecca said she really likes how suspense builds upon the story as it unfolds with split time, and Stacy says she loves that about split time. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I think. Because some people, they may not be able to handle the two storylines reading that, but if you do like that, then I mean, if especially if you like historical too, a lot of times I think you're just going to be grabbed by split time because it's just that bringing the history to the present day and connecting it to you today. Like doing genealogy, I love to do genealogy of my family, and I think that's what drew me to split time too. Writing and reading it, it's just knowing like I can connect a story from the past to my present, just like I'm doing with genealogy research. So I think it's
Yeah, I totally agree.
so cool. Okay, the next writing question: how long did it take to write? We'll say the trilogy. We talked about that a little bit, but how long did it take to write each of the books?
This is such a good question, and I don't have a straightforward answer because it was a very choppy process, and it's not, this is atypical. For me, I wrote each of these books completely, and then the first two got rejected because I hadn't written dual time before, and so my historicals were like just a small portion of what they ended up becoming. I was still trying to figure out how to do it. So initially they got rejected, and Rayla, who I ended up adoring, who's my editor, liked them a lot, but she wanted me to do more work on that.
So expand
So,
it. She wanted you to expand the
right,
historical.
right. And so, if you include those drafts and then writing Dress Shop, the whole series is probably about 7 years, 6, 7 years, something like that. Each book typically would take about a year, year and a half
Hmm.
cleanly. But so, like with Pain and Nectar, for example, I wrote the draft all those years ago, and then I kind of redid it because I knew that when I initially wrote it, I hadn't met, so to speak, Millie yet, and so there was that was missing from Eliza's story, which is a huge part of Eliza's story. And so I had to go back and like essentially rewrite half of the book to make it where it needed to be. And so in the middle of the pandemic, when I was doing Pain and Nectar, redoing Pain and Nectar, I kept the contemporary pretty much exactly. There were some things I changed, but it was pretty close to the original. And then completely overhauled Eliza's story. Eliza
Wow.
originally lived in this small little farmhouse outside of Charleston. It was like a totally different
That
story.
would have been
Now,
totally different without giving spoilers because the house that she lives in is very key to the historical story.
right. Right. And that's the kind of thing I mean. Like, she and William had this sweet romance thing going on, and there was like a feuding families thing going on. But all of the stuff with like the core of preservation and all that was just barely in there. And I recognized that that's what was missing. That was the heart of the story. So I rewrote basically half of the book in the pandemic,
Wow.
even prior to edits and everything. And a similar kind of thing happened with Where the Last Rose Blooms. I rewrote that whole historical as well, but that contemporary needed a lot more work too. I rewrote a whole lot of that one. So with these, I would say it was closer to probably 2 years each, and chopped up and out of order, kind of messy.
It
But if I'm
was a
just sitting
learning
down from
process, right?
scratch,
It was a learning process,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And if I'm just sitting down from scratch and I already have things brainstormed,
Mhm.
then it would only be about a year, year and a half. I mean, still a lot of time because it
Yeah.
takes time to get the interconnectivity. You can't force that. You can't just like sit down and say, I'm going to write all day long until I figure it out. Those types of things, you have to allow them to just come to you. And sometimes that takes months in order
Yeah, and
to
I
get
like
everything
to
to
say
fit
too
correctly.
about split time is you're essentially writing two novellas that have to weave together, but each little book has to have its own story arc, character arcs, and then
Right,
combine. And so
right.
it is extra challenging, and especially the way you did it, because like Christy Cambron wrote a trilogy, the Lost Castle series trilogy, but she had already written several split times before then. So for you to do your trilogy and have to go back and like rewrite parts and make them on that, I just know it was a headache and a half. Like I just props to you for doing that, Ashley. Oh my gosh. I
Well,
rewrote my first split time novel in 2019 because it was just a mess too. When you start moving stuff around, it can get a
yeah.
mess and it's just like ah.
I will say it's like a double edged thing. Yes, there were days when I was like, this is impossible because
I
you
give
feel like you're
up.
messing it up,
Mhm.
because you want to write in a way where everything's fluid and doesn't feel choppy, and you feel like you're messing it up initially. But you have to kind of trust the process because the other
Yeah.
side of that is I feel like Dress Shop in particular went through so many edits that it made it immensely stronger than it was before because so many of the scenes in Dress Shop that are now my favorite scenes, Like, for example, there's a moment at the end of Dress Shop with this lacy tablecloth that Millie like puts in the air. It's like a flashback to when Harper was a little girl, and it's at the very end of Dress Shop, and some important things happen in that scene. But essentially, Harper is a little girl, and it's when she first goes to her sewing lesson with Millie, and Millie has
Yeah.
this lacy tablecloth that she like does in the air, and it's like very much a symbol for the textile art and the textile heritage, essentially, that follows both of them throughout the rest of the book. That was not there until the 11th hour. That was one of the last scenes that I wrote, and I had already edited it like multiple times. And so I do think there's a richness as well that comes with a willingness to chop everything and like just add stuff, even though it can feel
Okay,
like
I'm gonna throw
chaos.
in a Louisiana reference, gumbo, south the Gulf Coast. It's like a gumbo.
There
You
you
gotta let the
go.
gumbo simmer. You gotta add
It's
in the stuff.
true.
You gotta let it build in the richness.
Right.
Etouffee is the same way.
Yeah,
A lot of
for
things like
sure.
that. A lot of our traditional foods. You gotta let it simmer in this
Yeah.
juices in the sauce and
Yeah, you really do. Because if you rush the process, even though it can feel overwhelming, it's not going to have the same richness, of that it otherwise would. So even though at times I was like, what have I done to myself? On the whole, I wouldn't change it at all because the books would never be what they are and they would never have the interconnectivity that they do, were it not for the untraditional editing process that happened with
Yeah,
them.
well, what you did, it's working because I mean, the
Thank
first two
you.
books just flowed so well, and I love the little Easter egg people. I was like, because when I was reading Paint and Nectar, I was like, oh yeah, them, they're here. Oh my gosh, that's him. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's not giving anything away, but it's
Yeah,
just cool. So like your brain like goes, oh yeah, that's him. Sorry, that's her. That's really cool, and that's going to be something cool to be able to go back and read them again when you have the third one out too, so that
right.
when you read them close together, you'll be able to like find all those little things too. And I love that. I think it just adds an extra layer of connectivity and richness to the stories too, to be able to find those little connections. And you wrote a novella now, a Christmas novella,
I
and it's set
did.
at Millie's board house, right? It just released, so congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called Christmas at the Inn, and it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more romance heavy. I wanted it to just be kind of light and
That's
fun for
fine.
Christmas,
We
right?
love
So,
romance.
I hope you guys like it. It's a little, even a little bit more rom-commy, and it's historical. It's set in 1952, and Millie does show up quite frequently because she's a little bit of a matchmaker for the
Ooh.
characters. And it was really, really fun to do. I had so much fun, like stepping back to Millie's boarding house and little change of pace, because it's kind of, like I said, it's a lot lighter. It was just fun. I felt like I spent some time with Millie, so I hope you guys feel the same way whenever you
Oh,
read
I'm
it.
excited to go back to it. I bought the book. I've just got to read it soon. I'm looking forward to it and going to Millie's boarding house, and I can just see her being a matchmaker. It's going to be good. I know.
It was fun. It was really fun.
Yay! All right. Well, let's continue the questions. This is so good. Okay, we're now going to. Oh, we still have writing questions. Sorry.
No,
Oh,
you're fine.
here's the question that I was referring to earlier. Um, Rachel DeClerc asked, "Are you more of a plotter or a pantser?" It's a big writing
It,
question.
yeah, this is a great question. It has changed for me over the years. I used to completely be a pantser. And then when I found split time, because of the interconnectivity with real history, I had to change my strategy a little
Your
because
ways had to change a little.
yeah, and I didn't want to do anything that was going to be inconsistent or wrong. So I feel like, particularly with this series, because each of the books has a hook in real life, right? So, like in Dress Shop, the satchel and the buttons are based off of some real life things. And in Paint and Nectar, it's the silver that they're trying to find. And in Where the Last Rose Blooms, there's a really important rose that's true to life, as well as a mystery surrounding a
Ooh.
fire that really did happen in the Civil War in Charleston that destroyed large portions of Charleston. And I thought that was so
Yeah.
interesting that nobody had the answers to that, right? So these types of things I could not just willy-nilly make stuff up. I had
Mhm.
to be a little bit more proactive.
Well, and some in
Also,
places also you're writing about places that are heavily tourist, like tourist attractions,
yes,
and so people go there and
right,
do tours with and
right.
museums and stuff too, right?
Right. And so I also wanted it to have this, a credibility and essentially a structure that followed secrets and some suspense and development in that way. And so it's a little bit different from just saying, here's some contemporary characters, let's see what happens with them. I had to make everything fit together in a way that made sense with real life history. So
Mhm.
now what I do is I tend to plot out my big moments in the story, and I like to do it in smaller chunks. So I'll say, okay, in the midpoint of the story or at the end of the story, we need to discover X before this happens, and this is a huge shift for us. So what do we need to do to get to that point? And so it's sort of a combination. Like I let the characters do their thing, but it's like they're reined in a little bit because I
Yeah.
know they have to discover something for the next part to work. So I try to give, I feel like that's the best way to kind of combine the pros of both plotting as well as panstering, I guess you could say.
I hear you.
Because I think that an over reliance on either can be problematic. Like if there's no plan, then a lot of times the plot will meander too far. But
Mhm.
on the flip side of that is if you plan everything to a T, depending on your personality, some people can do this well. But for me, if I plan everything to a T, then a lot of the stronger creative aspect ends up falling by the wayside because I feel like I have to follow my plan and I don't really challenge myself. I feel like for me, my best writing is when I'm surprised along with the reader and I don't challenge myself to get to that place if I have every little detail planned out.
Yeah,
So I like to leave
yeah.
some room for the story to kind of take on its own life as well.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to have that little bit of room, but I think with split time, you almost have to be a plantser. A
Right.
plotter meets a pantser. It's and there's different levels. Like I'm gonna be higher to the plotter. I'm a very big plotter, but you've got to have some breathing room in the storylines, especially contemporary, because historical does not the present day does not affect the historical affects the present day. And so I
Right.
always am like my historical is going to be probably a little more plotted out anyway because the present day has to flow with that. But
Exactly.
if you're toward more pantser, you're still going to have to go into plantser, like we call it, to do a
Right.
little more plotting, just to kind of not dig yourself in a hole. I guess, like you said, having those a timeline for not only the historical, but having a timeline for your big moments where they start connecting and the reveals and stuff, which every author does that differently too, which is so interesting to study the different authors' techniques. So.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, yeah, so that's a great question. Our last writing question is how long have you been writing?
Well, I keep saying a decade, but I've been saying that for like a year and a half now. So it's been close to probably 12 years, but about 11 and a half years, somewhere around there. I started writing when I was, yeah, it's been 12 years actually, because I started writing whenever I was finishing my master's degree, and I didn't think it was going to take that long to get published because I was teaching English at the college level, and I felt like I've invested a lot of my life in this already. I kind of know what I'm doing. But as it turns out, I didn't know what I was doing just because I read Christian fiction and just because I knew how to write in terms of like a clean sentence did not mean that I knew anything about writing voice
I
or
feel that so
plotting
yes,
or
I
any of
understand.
that, you know? And so I had a lot to learn. But honestly, I wouldn't change any of that because if I had gotten published earlier, I wouldn't be writing. I would have never found my writing voice to the extent that I did. Like that
Yeah.
journey to publication caused me to keep pushing deeper into the stories that God has called me to tell. And I wasn't that person who I am now. When like 8 years ago, I hadn't
Yeah.
had those life experiences. And I
That yeah.
also, even if I had, did not have the toolkit to express them well. So for me, it was well worth it for the journey to take a little bit longer. But it took me about 10, 11 years to it took me 10 years to get contracted, and then it takes a while after your contract to get published
Yeah.
before dress shop. And so yeah, it's been about 12 years now.
Well,
So
and
it's been a
that
while.
gives me hope too because I've been writing about that time and there's a lot of life things that have happened that setbacks and things and don't
Right.
give up no matter what age you are, whether you have a degree or not, it doesn't matter. If you're called to write, then get in there, read craft books and write and just do it. And like you said, it's a learning process, especially split time. Split time is not for the faint of heart.
That's
Melanie
true.
Dobson and I always say that it's not going to be, especially the editing process with split time. When you start trying to move a few things around, you can mess your timeline up. So you just gotta, stick with it and go for it. And we're all still on our own
Right.
journeys that we're supposed to be on. So,
And I
so that was
really
your
think
timing. That was your timing.
it was. And I really think that what you said is so true, Morgan. Like that adaptability is one of the best assets that you can have when it comes to pursuing publication because like you inevitably are going to face setbacks. Even if you are the world's greatest writer and you get published right away or whatever, the market might not fit what you're doing in that particular moment, or you can have some people who just don't get it. Like with split time fiction, like some people absolutely love it, and then some people don't like it at all for the same reasons that we all love it, right? Like it
Yeah.
just is, it depends. And so you have to really build a resilience and really build an ability to adapt to that kind of stuff. And some of that can only come through time. I mean, it really can. It's like anything else in life. Sometimes you just have to have experience before you know what you're doing. And it
And
just
it
takes
can
time.
be a range of writing experience, life experiences, just
Right.
different things like that. And seasons of
Mm-hmm.
our life are different at different times. And that's, I think that's so unique too about each writer. All the journeys are different. It could be their 15th novel, their first novel, their eighth novel. They could, it could be when they're 50, 60 years old, when they're 25. I mean,
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
really neat and just cheering each other on is fun too because especially the Christian fiction community is so warm and inviting and encouraging. So that's been so great. So if you're a writer right now, guys, you've been published and you're still on that journey, just be encouraged because every journey is different. And we're going to go a little over time, Ashley, if that's okay, because we had those technical difficulties. So
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
we'll move into our next section, split time slip fiction. Okay, Taylor Carlisle asked, did you always mean for your books to be split time or did it turn into one over time?
No, I didn't. I used to be terrified of historical fiction, which is interesting because I like the historical storylines the best in my books, which is kind of funny. But I spent the first half of my writing journey only writing contemporary romance. I started trying to write chick lit and rom com, and then I went to my first writing conference. I'm all jazzed about it, because I love like Kristen Billerbeck, and I still love
Oh,
Kristen
yeah.
Billerbeck. But Kristen Billerbeck and Laura Jensen Walker, and I'm like, this is what I love to read. This is what I'm gonna write. So
This is it.
I was just like, I'm gonna get a contract. It's gonna be awesome. And then I remember somebody told me, chick lit is dead, and I was like,
Ah,
I'm supposed to be writing that.
crushed.
And it turns out chick lit wasn't actually dead. Well, chick lit as a term kind of is, but rom com, just like everything else, comes in seasons, and rom com is actually huge right now. If I had just stuck
Yeah.
around long enough, then I might have been able
Well,
to publish
you
my next
found your
novel.
niche. You found your niche you needed. We want you to stay
Thank
in split
you.
time, please. I hope you stay
Well,
with us.
thank you. I plan on it because I feel like what ended up happening with me is that I found these stories that I couldn't tell in any other way except
Mhm.
for them to be split time books. And that's how I knew that I'd really found my market because I wasn't trying to chase any kind of cool trend, or
Yeah.
and I certainly wasn't confident in what I was doing. But I was like terrified. I was sending all my historical chapters to my friends, like, how bad is this on a scale of 1 to 10? But I felt like it would do the stories a disservice if they were
Mhm.
not set up in a split time structure. And then everything kind of fell into place from that. So it
Yeah, and
took me
like
a
it gave
while
it
to find
that
it.
richer experience. The novels wouldn't have been
Right.
that richness. They wouldn't have been quite that rich
Exactly.
without the connectivity.
Right. It kind of loses
Yeah.
the oomph.
Yeah, because and that's the thing is like I mean a lot of times you can read the historical parts of split time and it be a good story and it's good, but you're missing that contemporary thread, that other
Right.
thread that's tying in, whether it's three storylines or two. But yeah, it is scary. Like that's what was scary for me is I started writing split time, or how I hadn't come from contemporary historical. So I think that's why it's taken so long too for me, because didn't start in one of the sides. I started with both, and it was very overwhelming. But it was just like that passion I had for the genre, and I still obviously have that passion. So
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you know in your heart of hearts what structure best fits your story. And
mhm.
if you're brave enough to write the story according to what it needs instead of according to your comfort zone, then you will eventually grow into a new place as a writer. But if
Yeah,
you only write according to your comfort zone, then a lot of times you can kind of put a cap on your story and you only let its potential go so far, and that can be really problematic. So when it became clear to me that, like with Dress Shop is a great example, trying to convey those types of things through letters or journals or whatnot, it was just not going to be the same.
yeah.
I just decided to take a chance, and I'm so glad that I did because
So
it
glad
ended
you
up
did
being
too,
such fun.
because yeah, and you can, I mean, and all the hard work you put into it paid off because they read beautifully. So
Thank you so
great
much.
job. You're welcome. Okay, our next question is, okay, let's see. How do you decide on the meter of the two stories? Things like when will ties between timelines happen and what pieces are planted when and then when they are picked later. Like, did you have any specifics on how, like you said that, I know you said you made a timeline of the big events. Is that kind of how you handled that to be
Yeah, and this
sure?
is going to sound like a really hokey answer, but it's true. I feel like the story sort of tells me as it's developing. I don't feel like I have a lot of control over that. I feel like I have this gut sense of when things need to come out with the story. And I feel like if when you're writing, if you're respectful enough to your characters and what you do have control over developing, then you will begin to recognize patterns that are emerging sort of on their own accord
Hmm.
because you know the people so well, and you have to just be sensitive to that. And sometimes you even have to switch up what your original plan was. Like I've had times where I thought, okay, I need to get to this secret by this time or whatever, and then it's changed.
Yeah.
I will say that I typically try to make sure that something comes up at like certain percentages of the book, like
Mhm.
by 100 pages, by 150 pages, by 200 pages, by 300 pages, just so that people don't feel any lag.
Yeah.
So I do that. But otherwise, I really just try to be sensitive to the pulse of when it feels like something big needs to happen. And some of that probably also comes from reading a lot of split time fiction. I've kind of internalized that sixth sense of like,
Yeah.
we need a discovery or we're going to get bored kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so I really, yeah, I feel like I kind of just try to listen to the story, which I know sounds silly, but it
No,
really
it
does.
doesn't. It doesn't
It
at
helps
all.
me.
And I think too, because like, yeah, reading split time, reading it's just a different experience because you're always waiting for something extra to happen. There's always extra, something
Right.
extra, because it's not just following one storyline. You're following different, and sometimes in each, like contemporary and historical, you might have different little subplots going on in each one, obviously. So there's all these little threads that you're trying to keep up with, and one thread might take prominence in one line, and the other one might weave this way. So it just that really keeps us on our toes, I think, too. It's just wondering which threads are going to come to the surface when and weave here and there. And I think that's the part of the mystery of reading it too, is there's always the mystery of how is this story going to unfold, and twist together and connect. And I think that's
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
what's
Yeah.
so intriguing about the genre. Okay, great answers. All right, the last question in this section is, um, what order do you write your novels? Back and forth between storylines, or do you write the whole historical storyline and then write the contemporary? Or have you written this a different way? Have you written your stories a different method?
Yeah, that is a really great question. So, left to myself, what I like to do is write everything like start to finish because I feel like that's the best way to build the suspense between contemporary historical when you're jumping back and forth. It
Mhm.
allows for a nice fluidity in transitioning. That said, it doesn't always work like that. So, like I said, with Pain and Nectar, it ended up that the contemporary was really strong because, again, I'd been doing that for like 7, 8 years at that point. But my
Yeah.
historical needed so much work. So, I ended up totally rewriting that. And that's the first time I'd ever done that. have like one half done and then totally rewrite another section. So I have done it both ways, but left to myself, I do it start to finish. I feel like that's a little bit easier unless there's some kind of a structural thing you have to address. And something that's really interesting is that every book is different. Certain things are really easy that might have been harder with another book, and then certain things are really challenging that might have been easy with another book. And so you just never know like what that particular batch of characters, it's kind of like baking something. Like you never know what that batch is going to do. You just have to, you throw the ingredients in and then you hope for the best and see what happens.
Yeah, and every batch could be a little bit different. So yeah, I
Right,
think that's
right,
good. And I think too, because like Melanie Dobson and I talk in our book about in our book, like, there's different ways you can approach. If you're kind of intimidated to write it back and forth, then we do suggest possibly writing the historical and then writing the contemporary. Because
right,
the historical, like I said, the present day does not affect the historical. The historical affects the present day. So the historical
right,
still, it's not going to move. It's there. It's there,
right.
but the contemporary has to be really woven in. So that's a suggestion that, and I'm trying that myself now, with writing my next book, just the historical and then writing the temporary. So just, and you got to try different things. I mean, with writing, you got
Right.
to experiment to find your voice, to find the way you set things up. I came into split time being more connected to historical. Like you're connected more to contemporary. I was more historical. So my historical was more strong and my contemporary was weaker. So I've had to
Right.
rewrite and really work on my contemporary for my first split time novel. So just we all have the parts that we kind of lean more towards, but that connectivity for both and both be compelling in their own way is key to this genre. So
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's very rare for them to come at the same time. Usually you have to do more development on one or the other, for
yeah,
sure.
and I feel like over time, if you're writing split time and you get more used to it, you will be more used to writing that back and forth to be able to write it from start to finish. Because I gravitate to that too, but it's that whole the editing process, which I think can really mess you up when you have to start going back and rewriting scenes or moving stuff, and your
Right.
timeline can get out of hand. So that's why I was like, I'm gonna experiment and I'm gonna try it a little different for my next
Yeah,
draft of a
that's a fun
book.
idea.
So just to kind of see what I like. But yeah, just experiment. All right, now our
Absolutely, yeah.
last questions are about research because we know that has to play a part in split time fiction. So Perry Ann asked how much research is involved in your dual timeline novels.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, where most of the ideas have come from has been actually being to these places in person and doing things like walking tours or talking with residents or seeing these things that have sparked a very realistic experience for me versus just, oh, I read this in a nonfiction tourist book or whatever it might be,
Yeah,
and then I take kind of that nugget of that initial hook, and then from there I do however much research it takes to expand the story world to make it consistent with history and believable. I tend to be intimidated by this aspect because I'm kind of perfectionistic and I get very afraid of doing something like wrong. I don't want
I
to ever be
understand.
inconsistent. And I tend to write in different times in history. I'm not someone who writes like Regency England. And so every book I know what I'm doing because I could live in Regency, right? Like I'm in
Yeah, yeah,
different decades. And so some of them I'm more familiar with. Like, some of the stuff with like Millie's clothes and things. I have some vintage dresses or vintage
ooh,
jewelry or
love it.
whatever. Maybe it's not like my whole wardrobe, but enough that I can feel them myself or I can kind of have that experience. The farther back in history, like with this third book, it was really scary at times because I was like, all right, this is all the way back, the 1860s. I don't want to mess any of this up. But what's interesting is I got so research heavy in the third book in particular that my editors were like, we probably need to cut some of this. Like, this description is too much. Like, people don't need this much
It's
description.
great,
It,
but let's
right.
calm
It
down
was
a little
reading
bit.
like, overly descriptive where you're kind of lost in it. So, what I've learned to do, what I typically try to do, is to make sure that first and foremost, I'm prioritizing the characters and then building their setting around them. And so it varies from book to book, but with the research, I usually just do however much research I need in order to build their story worlds, in order to make the plot work really well. I never want it to be like I'm fictionalizing or trivializing real life events that are very important. And that does take a lot of work. And so I will try to focus my research on those particular contexts, you know. But I'm not necessarily someone who sits down and reads like 7 books about whatever it was.
Yeah.
I try to do it a little bit more organically if I can through, again, walking tours or things like
Yeah.
that where it feels a
Your
little bit,
experience, and if you can, yeah.
yeah, it's a little more accessible, I think, for me, and hopefully becomes a little bit more accessible for readers as well. So I try to kind of create that balance because otherwise I do get, just me personally, I get too stuck in the details and it becomes cumbersome, I think, for the story. I have to walk it back a little bit.
Well, I think that's always the hard part. Is when we're, especially with first drafts and stuff, it's always
Right.
better to kind of let yourself just put extra in there, and then when you're the editing process just refines, 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 and some of it you wish didn't get refined out of it, but it needed to.
It just has to.
That perfect description that went on for a half page, like it was beautiful,
Right.
but
Doesn't, not gonna work. It's not
that's
gonna
the
make it.
yeah, and that's why the editors, they know what they're doing. The editors know what
Right.
they're doing. So,
That's the
yeah,
truth.
but it is
That's
hard to get
them.
sucked into that too because you do want that authenticity with that
Right.
time period and that difference. And I love that you're writing with different time periods too because I'm the same way. Some people I know, they're like they love a certain time period and era, which is great. But like I just love different parts of history and it keeps my mind just active, like to learn. I want to learn
Right.
different things. Let's see. That's a great answer. Okay. So Carol Lear Johnson asked, "What is your method for organizing research?" So how did you this all this stuff that you were seeing when you were in Charleston? Did you have a notebook? Were you just writing down what the tour guide said, or were you just kind of absorbing? What do you What was your method?
Yeah, I am not a very organized person. It is not my strong suit. I feel like that kind of plays into things that are strengths and weaknesses in my personality because I'm very willing to kind of crack things open and think big picture about how could we put these pieces together. I don't typically approach the editing process. I love the editing process. Like I don't typically approach that with this fear of like, what if they take away this thing I loved? I'm more so the type to be like, let's try switching it up every possible way and see what happens. And I think sometimes, like, some of my writing friends, it drives them a little nuts when I'm like, hey, what if I did this? Every day it's like a new idea. So the flip side of that is when it comes to research, I'm very scatterbrained about it. And so, yeah, I do try to absorb most of it. If I have smaller details that are going to be important, I will jot that down on sometimes even just on my phone, like on a notes on in the notes app, you know, I'll make organized notes or occasionally on a notepad or whatever to go back to. But usually I try to allow the story to structure the research rather than the research to structure the story. And so I tend to research according to wherever I'm at in the story so that it can build the story worlds rather than feeling like I have to cram the story into something that has happened because I feel like doing the latter will really weaken the story structure in my own experience, just with the way that I operate.
So do you kind of in your method? Do you kind of do some early research just to kind of get the story, the skeleton of the historical done, and then you
Right.
research along right as needed? Is that what you said? That's what you
Right.
mean?
So I typically will start with some kind of historical secret or something like that that's like enough of a nugget that it's really interesting for my characters to explore. And I get enough, like you said, enough general information to build that up. And then from there, maybe my characters are going to a dance or maybe they're going to a restaurant or whatever it is. I take
Yeah.
it more scene by scene to figure out the details. You know, I might even get on Pinterest and like try to find some old vintage pictures. Like I did that with
Of
Millie's first scene.
course.
Yeah,
Ah.
I that's where some of those details came in. I browsed through actual pictures of like soda fountains and things and what it would have truly looked like. And then I was able to construct as I was writing, I had this image in my mind of what these things really did look like. So I could just kind of put Millie be in there,
Yeah, and let her be
So,
doing things. Yeah, doing what would be natural in that setting. I like
right,
YouTube videos too, to watch YouTube
right.
videos of settings too, to kind of put myself in the place, especially if I've been there. I can be like, okay, I'm going to go there again in my mind and visually to look at my pictures, look at YouTube. But I know authors who can't visit the places they're going to. I know YouTube and Pinterest and stuff. Those are some very good
Yes,
tools. And
right.
Google Earth. Google Earth, actually walking the streets on Google Earth can be huge too.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, our last question is from Mary Sunshine. What was the most interesting information you found out while researching for your book or your trilogy? We'll just say your trilogy.
So I think that for each book, I try to make the hook of the book, which is like the historical note at the end, my best stuff. So for each one, I would say it's that. But for the trilogy as a whole, this is difficult. But I don't know. I'm gonna have a tie
It's okay. Good. It's
between
fine.
Millie's satchel, her grandmother's satchel, which is fascinating to me because it's really existent and in a Smithsonian right now. A
Oh,
tie
wow.
between that and the historical mystery about the Great Fire in Charleston, the Great Fire of 1861. In a way, the fire kind of prompted the whole series. I'll just say that
Wow.
because that's the first idea that I had.
Hmm.
And then one of my tour guide friends said, I told her about that. And then one of my tour guide friends said, have you ever heard about this satchel? Here's something
Ooh.
you should look into. And that's when it all just started exploding. And I was like, this is all connected in this series. This is going to be amazing. And I was really excited about it. So, yeah, I would say probably both of those things kind of working together.
Yeah, that's like
Because
you said,
I'll
those
just
little
say this.
nuggets that you found, the little nuggets kind of drove the
Right.
story and the trilogy. That's really awesome.
Right. So, without giving anything away with the fire, I'll just say this. There, nobody knows to this day who started this fire or how it happened. They have some guesses, but they don't know.
Hmm.
And whether intentionally or not, and it probably was unintentional, the fire honestly helped the Union win ultimately
Hmm.
because it destroyed so much of Charleston that it really weakened the Confederate kind of um,
Stronghold.
defenses
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forward. So it took a
Supplies
little
too. Yeah.
while, but without that, it's kind of like questionable. I mean, probably the
Mhm.
Union still would have won, but it was really important
Yeah, because this
for
was
the
Sherman's march
battles.
to the sea, right? Was this
Right.
Sherman's march to the sea? Yeah. Yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
made a turning point in the war that time, the time right then. So I know a little bit about Civil War history. A little
Yeah.
bit have an interest in that too. Yeah, so I can't wait to read it for that aspect too. But yeah, okay. So that was our last question. But I have one more question from me.
Yeah.
I want to know what you're working on next. So we know this trilogy is a trilogy. So the third book's coming out in February. What's next? Split time,
Ooh,
right? I hope. I hope.
yes. Yes.
Yay!
So y'all pray for me because I'm about to send out my next proposal. I'm
Ah, yay!
really excited about it. And I'm trying to think of how I can explain it without giving anything away. I'm really excited about it. Like, really excited about
I
it.
want you to tell us everything, but you can. I know. So just whatever you can give us, we're excited about it.
So I'll say it's split time,
Yay!
and there are what could I say? It's a similar type of structure in that it follows these sort of complex and nuanced women in the
Ooh.
historical, but there's a new element. I'll just say that there's a new
Ah.
element that connects those people to the contemporary heroines, and I don't want to give it away. I'm just going to say
Yeah, it's
it's a
okay. No, it's
new
okay.
thing, and
Okay,
I'm
that's fine.
excited. And I didn't really answer that question at all,
No, no, it's okay.
but
We really just needed to know
I'm
that it was
excited.
split time and it's
It's
exciting.
split time.
So
Yes.
that's
And
that's
I think
really
that
the heart of it. We need to know.
I think you'll find that even though So they're a little bit different in that there are historical ties in these, but they're not necessarily historical mysteries, so to speak, like the Heirloom Secrets follows.
Mhm.
Rather than being secrets in that way, they're linked in a different way to history. I'll just say that.
Oh, man, you're good with the teasers.
Hey, thank you. I'm going to
So,
put that in my proposal.
yeah,
Good with the
good.
teasers.
Yes. So, I guess I'm going to vaguely ask another question about that. Is it
Yeah.
different timelines, eras, historical eras? Can I?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. As of right now, and keep in mind this stuff is prone to changing
Yeah.
because, like, Dress Shop, for example, was originally set in the 20s and 30s
Oh,
and it moved
wow.
to the 40s. Yeah. Because in order for Millie to be alive still, they
Yeah.
were like, 30s is pushing it. And so, these types of things, they're very prone to changing. However, currently, I'm looking at the 60s, the 20s,
Ooh.
and then like 1918.
Okay,
I'll
woohoo!
say that.
Awesome. Hey, well, that's a great teaser. It's obviously, if you're about to do a proposal, we will pray for you.
Please
This is
do.
exciting. Keep us updated. Let us know every Saturday. I have like author news posts, so please feel free to throw some author news if about your proposal, about, anything like that. So,
I sure
yay.
will.
And that concludes our interview. Thanks so much, Ashley. This has been so much fun. I loved your first two books. I know I will love the third one. It just happens to be set partially in my home state of Louisiana, where I am right now. So, of course, extra excited about that. And we just look forward to this next mysterious series, trilogy, books, whatever it's going to be. You've definitely got me peaked on and be like,
I
I
was
need to know
very vague.
more.
I'm
I
sorry.
need to know. You had to be vague. You have to be
I
vague.
had to be
So
vague.
this is the baby stage
Whenever,
of it. So
if and when it happens, you're going to be like, oh, that's why she couldn't say anything. Because it's sort of like an all or nothing kind of hook. It's very hard to explain without just telling you
yeah,
what it
no,
is.
we understand. We're just glad to hear that it's going to be split time and that you're going to continue
Yes,
this genre. So
absolutely.
yay! Well, we excited to see you more on our Facebook group too. We can chat more about your books. And like I said, guys, if you haven't commented at least once, comment. We'll be. I won't be drawing until Sunday night for the winner of your choice of Dress Shop on King Street or Paint and Nectar. So go ahead and if you're listening to this after it's live, then you can leave a comment. You'll still be entered to the giveaway. So Ashley, thank you so much. This has been great. And we wish you the best of luck. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working. And I know you just seem like you're having so much fun with this, especially after you've gotten over the headache of all that editing and to get the books
Yeah.
out there. Like, congratulations, because that is a huge milestone. I feel you rewriting. I've been there. I am there. I understand.
Thank you
We
so
press
much. And thank you
on.
guys just for all your support and for your questions and everything. It means so much to me. It really has been a total dream come true, honestly. I always was like, someday when I have readers, I won't take that for granted. And I really don't. Like, it never gets old. I appreciate each one of you so much. So thank you guys for watching, for having me, and just for being great.
You're welcome. Well, you have a great Saturday. Everyone, you have a great Saturday too. And I'll say bye to you now. Ashley, goodbye.
Bye.
And guys, I hope that you will hang out in the Facebook group. I'm going to show her next book right there. Look at that beautiful cover again. Like I said, comment to be entered in the giveaway to win one of Ashley's books. Check out her novella, Christmas novella. Check that out on Amazon and other retailers. And I hope you guys have a great Saturday. And I'll see you later. Bye.